Well, thank you for joining us. This is a new series we're doing over the month of July, and we're hoping to have a little bit of fun with it. So that's why I'm here. It's why Kyle and Aaron, we're going to kind of take this month to sort of talk about albums that we're enjoying and we're liking, that we have liked, and putting a little spin on it. We're going to talk a little bit about the album, maybe a little bit about a particular song in the album, but then how it kind of points to, say, a truth of who Jesus is, a theological truth, or how we can live out our faith. And so that's what we're doing. We're calling Hi-Fi Seminary. So bear with us. It's a little bit different. We're not kind of used to doing it this way, especially in an actual studio. And so we are. We'll just kind of, I guess, jump in with their first album, which is from the band Johnny Swim.
Appropriate jump in.
Yeah, just
Johnny
as
Swim into
Johnny
a pool.
Swim. We'll go to this camera here, I guess.
Literally jumping into the series.
Yeah. Well, they're leaning back into the whole thing. So anyway, yeah. So this is Johnny Swim. This week I brought the album, and so part of what we're going to do is sort of encouraging all of us to sort of take some time, listen to the album, enjoy it. Might be an album we've never listened to before or don't normally do, and then we encourage you listen to the album. Hopefully, something you like. So this is Johnny Swim. This is their newest album. Just came out in April, I believe, of this year. They're a husband and wife group. Abner Ramirez and Amanda Sandano Ramirez. So yeah, I love this band. So I don't know what you guys.
Yes, you do. You talk about it all the time.
I do. I talk about them a lot. I think their voices are astounding together. I'm just a big fan of both their voices, but Abner has, one of the best voices I think in the industry as far as music goes.
He almost is better than Amanda.
That's the goal of a couple.
Yeah, I feel the same way too, but I like
not to be sexist.
Not well, and not to be like Amanda's terrible. No. Amanda's amazing.
Yeah.
I just really, and then when they go together, yeah. Sorry, Amanda, we do really like you too.
Yeah.
If she's listening,
maybe have a crush on your husband. That's all.
We definitely have a crush on your husband. But okay, so I love this band.
Yes.
And so it's more just like the listening. Like there's 2 documentaries that they do. The one is showcasing them when they're like on the road, and they have 3 little kids. And so this is like right before the pandemic, the one on the road. And so it's with their 2 little kids who are like, I don't even remember how they maybe 2 years old, and the other one's maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. Yeah, on the road, and then she's actually pregnant on the series. And then the second documentary is sort of life in the midst of the pandemic and them trying to be artists and doing things where they do backyard concert live streams that you can actually go to YouTube. You can watch them, and they're really great to watch. You're trying to keep work happening for them and for the people that sort of work with them and the band and technical crew. But what I think I love about this band is if you watch the documentaries, they just seem like they'd be fun to hang out with, beyond the music. They even have someone called a vibe tech, and that basically,
vibe tech.
Yeah, basically just about making sure things are good, and she does the social media, and if you do any of their live streams, she's the one you're chatting with at that time.
I just picture putting that on your resume. What did you do at your last job? I was a vibe tech, and having to explain that.
Well, I don't know. They even one of the backyard concerts, it was her birthday, and they made her a special shirt that said the original Vibe Tech or something like that. But the whole idea is creating a fun environment, and you get that. And so the documentaries, again, you see behind the scenes, and that their family really includes the band, the managers, nannies, because
kids,
they have kids. Yeah. One of the coolest things, if you get a chance, and I highly recommend, they have an audiobook sharing a lot about their life and growing up and just the different challenges and fun things with that, as well as just stuff on the road. Their engagement story is worth the price of admission for that book. But if you look to the audiobook, it's them doing it. So of course, when they tell the stories,
Nice.
It's just a little bit.
It's always better when the author reads the book.
Well, that and like both of them are great storytellers, but again, we kind of enjoy Abner a lot. He is just a gifted storyteller.
We can tell his songs.
Oh, absolutely. The songs absolutely do that. But like, so when they talk about the origin of their name, they never really say the same story twice. It's usually some outlandish story of so it's just like even on in the book, I think there's about 4 or 5 different stories. They say, so this is where we got the name from, and they go into this. Just
you got an example of one? I haven't listened. I haven't heard.
Oh, there was one something about they had to. I think they had to like sneak out of a village somewhere in South America, I want to say, and then the guide had to get the boat was on the other side of the river, and the guide had to like jump into the river and swim to the other side to get the boat, and
his name was Johnny.
Yes, it was like
wow.
something like that. I could be totally butchering it. Go read the book, listen to that. But anyway, so this album was something they wrote actually during the lockdown, and this is their 4th studio album. Again, I think probably and I'm a big fan of all of them, but this is probably my favorite. They even did a sort of some of the fun stuff they did in the pandemic. They even did the thing where they meet someone on Instagram and then write a song with them and record it by the end of the day. And you can get that EP called Songs with Strangers.
That's cool.
Do they have to give royalty rights to that random person?
You'd have to ask them all that works. I'm sure they've worked it all out somehow. But yeah, it's kind of cool. But anyway, so they really recorded this a lot of the pandemic, and Amanda, actually speaking about the album, said this: "This has been the most isolated we've been in a creative process, but part of that, But part of that has been really nice because instead of going off what we feel other people are responding to, we're really just trusting our own instincts and saying what we feel we need to say in a way we need to say it. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's the most us a record has been in a long time."
Yeah, I mean, listening to the record, I get the feeling that like it's almost like you're transplanted into their really intimate moments as a couple and as a family, that I got the real sense of like I'm there.
Right.
And there is just a real connection that takes place that is, it inspires wonder. That's what I really experienced in listening to the album.
That's really cool.
Well, you always trust someone more when you hear their story, and you hear their stories through their transparency about like some of these lyrics. Mm-hmm. And like you said, Aaron, you see them, you hear them, and you're like, oh, I'm there with you.
Well, and yeah, like it makes you think differently. Like one of the songs I really like, not the song that we'll dive in here in a little bit, but it was Devastating. Like it's about true love, but it's about if it's really true love, it's gonna end in heartbreak, which is the idea. You'll live for a long time. One will pass away usually before the other, and that's gonna be heartbreaking. And and I love it because the line is, "I lose you or you lose me. Either way, it won't be cheap. I want to love you till it's devastating, until the dirt cries and my grave is waiting. Is it even worth it if there ain't heartbreak waiting? I want to love you until it's devastating."
Yeah.
I've never thought of that before. And just the idea of like there's going to be a heartache, but it's so worth it because it's going to be this lifetime of love. And I love that.
Yeah. They're really speaking about the reality of what a lifetime together is in Hollywood, in the stories we read. Like it's always focused on the getting together and the happily ever after for the most part. I know there's been definitely a change we see in a lot of the stories gets told lately about like how real love, even outside of the church, like in the stories we see on movies that get released, like real love is like hard. And I think that's great that there's a song out there that really talks about that, and I love that the record starts with that.
Yeah, it's a great start.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that one, we're talking about Heaven Everywhere. That's a song we'll talk about in just a few moments. Probably my favorite song though on the whole thing is "No Time for Sleeping." which is this beautiful Latin rhythm. And the melodies and harmonies, man, I mean, I don't remember where it sits. There's no like, oh yeah. Like it's like, I don't know, the 8th song on the album for anyone who's just jumping.
Right in the
jump
sweet
there.
spot in the middle, right
like,
there.
It is so beautiful. When they do the harmonies and they just sort of sing out that chorus, it just like, I had goosebumps. And the first time I heard the song was actually like a live stream concert. And so they're doing it together. And it was just him on guitar and the two of them singing into like a single mic. And it was just like, it sounded so great. So I love that one. And then Holla, Holla, Holla.
Fun.
It's just a fun song.
Is that the one we play on Sundays, in case you're wondering?
Yeah, we do. It is. If you're ever with us on Sunday mornings when we're together, Holla, Holla, Holla's on there. I think Heaven is Everywhere has actually been on there once or twice. But yeah, Courtney and I, my wife, we love this song. There's a great recording of it on YouTube, which is sort of like it's a recorded live video. It's like at a convenience store. And it's a really cool video. And then the fact that it's recorded live is kind of gives you, it's not just sort of them lip syncing like a lot of music videos tend to be. We can probably link that in the descriptions and stuff like that for people who want to listen to that. But getting on this song is Heaven is Everywhere. So this is kind of where we move into, like, we've talked a little bit about the band and
settle
kind of
in,
some
everybody.
of the enjoyment. And we talk a little bit about this this song. And then, so the song we're going to land on again is Heaven is Everywhere. And I do love this idea. Heaven, or how you want to say the kingdom of God, the presence of Jesus. However you want to frame that, it is everywhere. So Abner, he actually talks about this song kind of when this album was released. He said, when I started singing this chorus in the shower, so it's inspiration.
Mine's
Some
usually
of my
somewhere
best
else
thoughts
in my
come in the
bathroom.
shower.
Mine's on a different part of the bathroom. Just saying. Sorry, Nikki. To tell
It's like, we're not going to ask you which part. Okay.
you can figure it out.
I'm just going to
Context.
go on with the quote here.
Yeah,
Please,
just-
please,
all right.
please.
When I started singing this chorus in the shower, I felt like what was inside of me was bigger than the whole world and I wanted to share it. He goes on to say, I find whether it's in church or in politics that people get so obsessed with right and wrong and their certainty of it. If we experience the beauty of this life, even through the drudgery and the misery, there's glimpses of heaven all around us at all times. My hope with this song is that people can feel that when they hear it and they sing it.
Yeah.
So I was listening to this song kind of as I was going through a devotional by Sky Jatani. And the devotion focused really on Mark 8, 14 to verse 30. And it really was the focus of a blind man being healed. Now, the miracle that stands out, specifically this, is because the sight isn't restored instantly. It's actually restored over stages. Most stories that we hear, the healing, it's pretty much he's healed and then instantaneous right there. It's right there. And so first, it's described in Mark 8 that when the blind man starts to see, he describes people as trees. So he's seeing something, but as Guy Jatani sort of puts it, he was unable to discern the difference between the trees and the people. And then in the devotional, Sky kind of relates this to the disciples' journey. In chapter 8, so the same chapter, we move from feeding a multitude, 4,000.
Yep.
Yet when they're leaving, and Jesus is very passionately sharing with them about the Pharisees and his frustrations, they are so preoccupied by the fact that they forgot bread to bring food with them. And then Jesus is pretty strong in coming down on them, like, really, have you not been there? And sort of like, just like, did you not remember what just happened? And then he refers to what happened, maybe, I don't know where the timeline fits. It's 2 chapters back if we're in that sort of idea. But like, do you remember when, I did that the first time and then I did it a second time? And basically calls them deaf and blind.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say, I imagine Jesus face palming and all the memes of eye rolling, but he doesn't do that. He just is. I imagine he does something the way he comes across is very different. Saying deaf and blind is pretty oh, wow, we're deaf and blind. That is not nice to hear, but he's saying it, I imagine him saying it with, Jesus just has a way about him, you know it, of saying those kind of things that really hit you hard, but you still feel loved. And I think that's important to take away from that.
Yeah. Well, and I think this should be really evident in the life lived. I mean, he's with these
He's been with them.
individuals. He just, yes, frustrations. As we know, the people we love the most, we can easily be the most frustrated with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was sort of like, I'm done with you guys. It's just sort of like, I'm frustrated with you guys at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I need to do or whatever was going on in his mind. But so from that story, we move right into the story of the blind man. Then after that, where we talk about the blind, he's healed in stages. It follows Jesus kind of asking the disciples who they think he is, and Peter replying, "You are the Messiah." Mm-hmm. So from being, from these miracles, from being called deaf and blind, to seeing Jesus more fully, I love this kind of progression that Mark is sort of woven in this whole thing. And it's not really, it's showing how blind the disciples were, and I think I'm pretty amazed because I think a lot of people I've heard over time to say, if we could just see the miracles, we would, we wouldn't have doubts, or we wouldn't, we just get it. And it's sort of like, well, the disciples did.
And they were with him?
And they were with him, and it seemed like it still took them a time and stages to sort of get it. So we have this movement of from basically, again, blind to deaf, to this sort of progression to where they see who Jesus really is as the Messiah.
Yeah, and just to jump off what Peter says, I always identify a little bit more of Peter in that similar telling of the story in John. But where are we going to go?
Yeah.
Like he's like, okay, you're the Messiah. It's still the progression of what does that mean?
Right.
We're always in that place of what does it mean that Jesus is the Messiah? And as much as we acknowledge it, we're constantly in this process of understanding who Jesus is as the Messiah.
Well, and I think that is sort of like what you have right after that, where Jesus predicts his death.
Yeah.
And they're all like, no. And he's got to rebuke them pretty strongly of like that. And so you
guys,
see
if you think I'm the Messiah, go back and read the Torah.
Yeah. You should know this. But it is that sort of, again, that idea of this, like, even though like, hey, they get he's a Messiah, there's still much they don't understand that obviously, in the coming weeks, or depending on how much time has passed, will they start to understand it more. And again, it becomes this idea of a progression where they understand more of who he is, and becomes more, he was there and seeing it.
One of the things I've picked up on this when I was thinking about it is I learned that babies don't have perfect vision when they're born, and they slowly they become more and more clear. So the way how Samuel looked at me when he was first born to who he looks at me as now, and he can recognize strangers, and he'll be like, that's not my dad, and then he'll be looking for me, and he can see me now across the room clearly, and that's how I see the progression.
That's actually a really good analogy.
It really is. I like that.
It just made me, I love when I'm across the room and someone else is holding Sam, and then suddenly he'll hit, this person isn't my dad.
Yeah.
And then I'm over here, come get me right now.
Yeah.
I need to be with you.
Yeah.
I don't know, just something I was thinking about when I read this.
Yeah. Well, and I think just the idea also to see the disciples being called blind, because I think quite often we refer that to religious leaders. The religious leaders were blind.
Those guys.
But not even those who had a front row seat were struggling. And, basically how could they, it does bring me comfort to sit there and say, hey, they missed these things. How could they not see it? Yet, when did it become real? And when did it become that realization? And I'm really glad, because I find that sometimes certain things I'm a fast learner on, I find that some of this stuff I'm not always a fast learner on, and it makes me feel a little comforted that even those who traveled with Jesus, were slow learners.
Yeah. Well, and I think it should humble us, not only in the way we approach our faith, and then the way we approach others in their faith, that they're not, and I think it's wrong for us to think of like their idea of like they're not at the same point we are. I think that's still a little bit arrogant.
Yeah.
But rather, they're seeing it differently. They're in process like I am. Yeah. There's things that I thought, and the way I saw Jesus 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, are vastly different from the way I see him now. And that's just from living life and changing and experiencing things and experiencing it in relationship with Jesus. And so I think that's really important to take away from that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why I enjoy our missional community so much, because we're so various in ages, that you have myself, the youngest one, it's still learning from, Grandma Bev.
Yeah.
But also listen to Nick and David and Faith share and stuff, and they all have these different points of views. And I have to remind myself not to be arrogant that, just because I work at the church doesn't mean I know everything.
Right.
And having them pour into me is so encouraging. I don't want to be the Pharisee and say I think I know everything just because I studied.
Right.
Yeah. So the lyric that really kind of in the songs that really hit me was obviously the chorus, which is just the repeating of the name of the song.
Yeah.
And can you feel it? But it's also it's the first verse where it says, the first time I saw it was in your eyes. It lifted me up to my surprise, and that really started something. And I wonder that when I think of the disciples, when was that moment of, wait a minute?
Yeah.
There's something about this. And the pre-chorus of this song talks about, we don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we see the idea of like, there's something that sparks. There's something that's important. As you said, like, they were following him. They didn't quite get it. There's some deaf and blind. But as Peter mentions in John, where else would we go? There's that moment of like, I don't think I get this. I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
But there's something to this. And to be able to basically sing this song kind of with that faith of, I got to remember heaven is everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think that's essential to following Jesus and staying in relationship with Jesus, is that for me, in a lot of ways, it's like I've been at some dark, low places where the only thing that has kept me from walking away from Jesus is the concern of what am I going to become if I do, right? And it's just that hold that Jesus has on you sometimes, that as much as you're discontent, you're in a bad place, only Jesus has the thing that I'm really looking for. I don't know what it is. I'm frustrated. I'm lost at this moment, but Jesus really is an anchor point.
Yeah.
It's Jesus, at least. At least I know it's Jesus.
And strange enough, an anchor is one of the earliest Christian symbols. Like, we often...
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. We often look at the cross, but that would have come obviously a little bit later. And it's a good symbol. But one of the earliest Christians is an anchor.
Yeah.
And I would imagine for some of that same reason of just like, keeps me here. So kind of like, as we kind of wrap this all up, this idea of, again, heaven is everywhere. Can we feel it? It really is about God being present and our eyes being open, much like, more and more, hopefully every day as we walk together as a community, as we walk together with Jesus as a community and as individuals, because God's presence is like, that's how he wants to be with us. That's how he wants to lead us.
Yeah.
It's about present. If you look throughout all of Scripture, him being present, God being present is a huge thing, even to Jesus. God is with us, Emmanuel, that whole thing. But I love David Fish in his book, Faithful Presence, says this church specific task is to bring Christ's presence to and discern his presence at work among people in our neighborhoods. He goes on and says, the question is not whether Jesus will be present, It's will he be recognized? And again, I love that heaven is everywhere. Can we feel it? Can we start to allow our eyes to sort of be open more and more in a progressive to start to see Jesus as we walk out our door in the morning?
Yeah.
As wherever we find ourselves, and again, to start to acknowledge it for ourselves, but to bring attention to it, because his presence is here and there, and it's everywhere. And even though we may not fully understand him,
Yes.
even though some days it may be really clear to us, and then the day before was completely unclear to us. Singing this song, "Heaven is Everywhere," to me is about opening my eyes up and start to see the presence of Jesus in the everyday. I think too often in church we're trained to see the presence of Jesus in the service. And I'm thankful for those moments. But if it's everywhere, that's such an important thing, and where Jesus is.
Yeah.
I knew a man in Bible college who started his day every day with a prayer of, God, show me your goodness, no matter how small, somewhere where I can see it. Because, sometimes you have those, like Aaron said, very low moments where you need that. Even a small thing can spur you on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that is the end for this podcast sermon type conversation panel series for week 1. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, just sort of really quick highlight for me personally. Heaven is Everywhere is a song about reminder for me to keep my eyes open, to allow God to show the progression of more and more how I see him. And I believe Johnny Swim is encouraging us to recognize his presence. So next week we'll be back, and Aaron we'll be in person, and we'll do the similar thing, but we'll be not in a studio. We'll be right in front of people. So come check it out. Aaron's going to be the one bringing the album and song and whatnot for there, and then we'll have another conversation about music again. The album this week is Johnny Swim, self-titled, came out I believe April. But anyway, thanks for joining us.